Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. A spoiler and forewarning, this analysis is expecting you to have watched both The Batman and at least the first episode of The Penguin. Please do so before spoiling them with my perspective. Also, this is in no way a deeply thought out or professional analysis, as that process will be saved for the release of the next film. Throughout Western popular media, it's hard to find a character as universally well known and as well understood as Batman. Every person understands the textbook psychoanalysis of why Batman does what he does, stating, Bruce died the night his parents did, as if unearthing some grand secret. So, when a fairly mainstream director such as Matt Reeves decides to change how Batman is portrayed in a feature-length film, many eyebrows are going to be raised. And many were by his 2022 The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson in the titular role. But as a film analyst, I'd like to lay the groundwork for my argument that The Batman is not only an incredibly effective adaptation of both existing Batman and noir stories, but also stands strongly enough to support and create optimism for the film or films that are to come. Because I'm asking the question of how important and impactful a Batman movie is, it has to be spoken about in comparison to the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan's run on the character is, in many people's minds, the pinnacle of live-action Batman adaptation, and has, due to it being released the most recently, stood for the modern, younger generations as the only real adaptation. Christopher Nolan built Christian Bale's Batman on a post-crisis Batman. Post-Crisis refers to the 1985-86 event Crisis on Infinite Earths, where DC Comics soft reset all of their IP to a new beginning. This transformation saw Batman become a much younger version of himself again. He was back to the late 20s bachelor seeking to prove himself in the dark streets of Gotham, and doing so by using the absolute newest technology and advancements. Batman has always kind of been DC Comics' mainline response to the technological advancements that have been developing since World War II. In the 50s, the Batmobile had an entirely mobile science lab in the back, allowing him to do cutting-edge science immediately on the scene. However, it was in the 90s that this tech boom really came to a head, seemingly making Batman more synonymous with advanced technology than simply effective detective work. This dichotomy was seen in the absolutely phenomenal Nightfall event in 1993, where Azrael, now wearing the mantle of Batman, becomes so reliant on his technology that he's essentially easily defeated by simply making him lose it. This late 80s to mid-90s is the Batman we see in the Dark Knight trilogy. A large majority of detective work and analysis is done through bleeding-edge technology and beating a few thugs up. Emphasis isn't placed on his capability as a detective, just on his capability as a fighter. Christian Bale's Batman is supposed to leap into a room and whirl around, knocking people out and looking cool. That's as far as it goes. Just look at Bruce's backstory. What is the audience shown about his journey? What do we, as a people, see of him becoming Batman? All we see is his tenure in the League of Shadows, a tenure that teaches him combat, stealth, and fear tactics, not blood spatter analysis. Nolan's Batman doesn't have time to just sit and analyze, however, as breakthroughs and discoveries come to him, not the other way around. His second persona of Bruce Wayne was up and about, however, making appearances, reclaiming Wayne Tech, entering the tabloids again. He doesn't care about it, but he sees it as another sacrifice made for the city. He's immediately ready to give up the family name for the sake of the night, but he still contributes to keeping it alive until then. Matt Reeves rejects both of these assumptions. The first point of Batman's investigation style isn't a surprise when you look at the source material that Matt Reeves pulled from to create this movie. The Long Halloween, Batman's Year 1 and 2, and movies such as Zodiac and French Connection are all stories famous for both their detective work and their grim perspectives. The most advanced technology we see Pattinson use is the contact lens camera, a piece of technology he uses to augment and record his own analysis of crime scenes he enters. He isn't using some massive sonar scanner to track the ballistics of a specific round. He's looking at and reading the different pieces of a crime scene, building it in his head. And also, look at who the big bad is. The Riddler. The Riddler has never been a fighter, never been a physical threat to Batman. He didn't appear in The Dark Knight because Christian Bale's Batman would have beaten the Riddler senseless while asking the same questions over and over again, relying on strength to intimidate him. Pattinson is investigating at every possible moment. He watches what people say and how others react to it. After reading a riddle, he puzzles through it in his head while looking at everything else. He's constantly thinking. To me, that's who Batman should be. And to the second point, Bruce is basically dead. He doesn't go out to the parties at night or buy a hotel when he feels like it. When he appears in the city, people are surprised. Bruce tries to bury that part of himself in his work, because Batman gets death threats and attempts on his life every night. He sees his public persona as a waste of time, not yet seeing the value of daytime activities. So, when this buried part starts getting death threats and is involved in murders, he has a really hard time reconciling the two. That's the genius of using the Riddler. In the first confrontation at Arkham, Riddler tells him, "I thought you were smarter." Riddler doesn't understand that Bruce is. He solved every riddle, every secret left for him, until Bruce Wayne was referenced. Bruce himself sees Bruce as being dead and left behind, so when Bruce is dug up and framed, he has a hard time reconciling his identities. This is the blind spot. This is the gap that the Riddler found, but had no idea he did. Bruce's second appearance at the Iceberg Lounge is where this turn really happens. Once the sins of his father are admitted, the investigation basically stops. This is where Bale's Batman comes back, simply reacting from hint to hint, following the clues rather than trying to surpass them. Bruce is Batman's fatal flaw, the bridge to the island he's tried to create around himself. It's a beautiful dichotomy played impressively well by Robert Pattinson. A note should be made, however, to explain the difference in narrative chronology between the two. The Batman is a movie styled specifically after Batman Year 2 by Mike Barr. This means that Pattinson's Batman is actually much closer to The Dark Knight than Batman Begins. Batman Begins is the origin story for Batman, creating the cave, his suit, his persona. That's all the foundation of the film. Pattinson starts with all of these things, except for the total public recognition. While this mismatch may be disappointing to audience members that sought a recreation of Batman Begins, the teaser for Batman 2, the history of the second film in the Dark Knight trilogy, and the story of the Long Halloween, in which the Falcone family mess originates, all points to the second film following Nolan's suit, and moving towards the same direction. Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy are superhero films, but Matt Reeves created a crime noir. They are entirely different films, different in their intents, desires, and presentation. Because of this, a direct comparison of cinematic elements and mise-en-scène would be more reductive than helpful, so I'd like to focus on the Batman and just what makes it a noir. Firstly, Reeves constantly and incessantly turns Gotham into a character within its own right. Gotham is an antagonist. When you think of Gotham, what do you think of? Dirty, dark, raining, scary? These are all things that can be found in spades in the Batman. Because to be in Gotham is to be attacked by it, either by the elements or the people within, because Gotham is an addict. And like a true addict, it's addicted to the crime that feeds its undercities, feeds its addiction, yet it hates itself for it in equal measure. Here, rain is omnipresent. Even when people are sitting inside having a discussion, the rain can't ever really be avoided. Scenes will start with a character dripping wet, clearly showing their movement through the city. It's this constant, almost reaction to what's happening. The immune system of Gotham trying to purge the grime and filth of its streets, but never really succeeding. Everyone is wet, everyone is dripping, and everyone kind of accepts it. This obvious filmic noir convention is combined with the political ads and graffiti strewn throughout the movie to make an almost war zone. No war in human history has existed without graffiti. It is the simplest and first form of rebellion, and again, everywhere here. Political ads are used almost to mark territory, being used to cover and brand a wall in the same way graffiti artists do, demanding attention. These images help feed the growing feeling of unrest and discord throughout Gotham, without having to really show anything. Lastly, the point that creates a chasm between the Batman and the Dark Knight trilogy is the expectation of audience interaction in the film. In The Batman, much like the titular character, the audience is expected to pay attention to what is happening on the screen. Not just in the foreground, but in the background too. As Selina is driving away, we can see Bruce following on his bike. The first time the Iceberg Lounge is shown, it's actually possible to see Riddler in his apartment, the one we later see after killing Carmine Falcone. Things are placed within the film with the expectation of the audience missing it. It's a scavenger hunt that leads you to the end, no matter how many clues you may have. It's very easy to watch the film and not pay attention. You won't be confused if you don't. But to truly recognize the strength of the film, you have to look very closely. Full enjoyment requires active participation, not passive. Something that probably most people missed while watching The Batman is in the final credits, a URL is shown taking you to the Riddler's website, La Rata Alada. There, a few riddles and secret information can be found, showing that the Riddler planned on being caught all along. Extra-diegetic interaction with a film is rare, but becoming more common in modern day. The information within this alludes to not only the Joker, but also to Two-Face, the most likely antagonist of the second and upcoming film. Reeves wants the audience to interact and interface with his film, a clear sign that he's more than prepared for the second of what hopefully proves to be an incredible adaptation of a beloved character. But now I want to take a step back from The Batman and look at the film's current continuation, The Penguin. The Penguin's director, Craig Zobel, has been in close touch with Matt Reeves, discussing and working on the show and the future film together hand in hand. This is obvious because most of the conventions I spoke of above are just as present in The Penguin. Gotham has been changed by the Riddler's actions, but now it struggles with an addiction that it can't sustain. Fights and action are a very small part of the show, instead focusing on conversations and schemes, sticking very close to the filmic noir inspirations of The Batman. With all this being said, I feel very comfortable combining these two sources into one analysis, regardless of how impromptu it may be. By the time this video is released, half of the first season will have been aired, so while this response may be incomplete in its scope, I'd like to show just how supportive I am before it continues to grow and evolve into the series it's set to be. Colin Farrell's Oswald Cobblepot is the personification of no plan survives first contact with the enemy. This isn't meant as an insult. It's actually one of the highest compliments I could give. Throughout the show, his plans go to hell, but he always adapts and finds another way through. Every possibility has a reaction he can take. To him, no hand is a bad hand, just different. He's a master of talking his way out of things, the characters in the show even stating he always says the right things. We're introduced to him firstly through action, minutes of silence as he does this work, but then we're shown him again through inaction. The show truly opens on a 6-minute scene of him simply speaking with Alberto Falcone. 6 minutes is a long scene in one location, especially if they're sitting down. Can you think of a show or a movie that had that long of a scene without people moving or doing something else? Scenes in action films usually run for 1 to 3 minutes, constantly moving from place to place. But from the beginning, it's made very clear this isn't going to be a superhero show. But it speaks to the strength of the director that this long of a scene doesn't feel long or dragged out at all. I'd like to specifically look at when Alberto tells Penguin that he knows he's been skimming. For the first time, he's genuinely nonplussed and isn't sure where to step next. But this isn't indecision. It's him trying to figure out the best way to play it. When Alberto continues on speaking, calling him a good soldier, Oz, for the first time in the show, drops his gaze. Even when a gun was held at him, he held Alberto's gaze. He didn't flinch. Now, as Alberto talks down to him, he accepts it and shows deference. That's the genius of Oz. He lets Alberto feel good about himself and still gets to do what he's been doing. Without apologizing or groveling, he inflates Alberto's ego and helps insulate himself. All with eye movement. In direct contrast to this, when Oz eats with Sophia, his silence is deafening. A man who previously talked a lot without ever really saying anything, now can't even talk. Oz's body language is screaming with discomfort. He's watching everything that he does. The only thing he said was, "Who's stopping you now?" because he knows that's a safe topic, hating her dad. He refuses to take a step on the ground he doesn't know is safe, and when she starts elaborating, he picks up the game, again making himself small and ashamed. It must be said that the acting is phenomenal. Pharrell's long monologue about Rex Calabrese as the camera slowly pans closer and closer is just incredible. Minutes of emotional, well-delivered dialogue is given without any kind of cut or stoppage. This, combined with the extensive facial prosthetic, creates a brand new kind of character. We're allowed to see someone as versed and as experienced in acting as Colin Farrell, but with a different face to remove his star persona. We don't have any expectations or previous biases about the main character because, in a sense, we've never seen him before. This gives him total freedom over his actions, and a blank check to fill with his amazing acting. Sophia Falcone, played by Kristen Milioti, is also a stunningly good actor. In our first introduction with her, the audience doesn't even need to hear that she just came from Arkham. Her body language, and especially her face, tells the entire story for us. The first time she smiles, a dozen red flags go up. Every part of her face moves appropriately, but not in the right order. Her eyes smile, and then her mouth moves as her eyes die. It looks almost right, but wrong enough that we know something isn't right. Lastly, both in the film and in the show, there's something about the sunrise in Gotham. As Batman stands in the morning sun, helping people escape the carnage of the city, as Penguin shows a new side of himself, sparing Vic's life. He didn't do it out of pragmatism. He's right. The best choice would be to kill Vic too, but he chooses not to. Gotham's natural state is nighttime, a world of the dark and of the shadows. The sunrise is anathema to this, a feeling of hope creeping through the clouds of despair. The sunrise does not represent the end of the journey, only that another step has been taken towards that pursuit. As a final note, please do look into the deleted scenes of the Batman if you're interested. They're really, really interesting and hopefully says a lot about what's to come. Thank you all for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.